Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Your weekly dose of news and advice that comes to your pocket every single Saturday. Holding it down, here we got Mac, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Enjoy today's show. Hey, welcome back into the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. This is episode 80, Saturday, November 23rd, and we're talking about the NFL MVP candidates of 2019. Yeah, we're not talking fantasy really today. I think that we can all but sum up who the fantasy MVP is. So we're going to get into what's buzzing right now, the league MVP. And we've all got some guys that we can talk about. It's been a crazy week for us so far. Lots of good stuff's happening with our live stream. If you came by and hung out with myself and Mark and Landon on Monday, lots of fun. Hopefully some of these guys that we told you to pick up, like Jonathan Williams, pay off this week. But without further ado, boys, how you been? It's nice to have the four of us back together to talk some real football.
Yo, what is good? I'm having a great week so far. It's been pretty busy for myself. I hope everyone listening is having a good week. I am excited to talk about the NFL MVP race. It's been a hotly debated topic on a lot of social media platforms, a lot of talk radio and all that stuff, and we've got some pretty good candidates. How are you guys doing today?
I am great. This is really exciting because the candidates this year for MVP, some of the best that I've thought about in previous years, and some of the quarterbacks this year I'm really excited to talk about because they are neck and neck.
Marky, what's good, homie?
Yeah, it's just been another superb week. Happy to be joined by all of you today on this fine Saturday. We actually just got a big dump of snow in northern Ontario, did some shoveling, got my back workout in. This is actually a time of year that I love, not just for the quality and tension in the NFL, but also for, it's the time of the year. Just makes me happy. Lots of time to spend together with people besides you guys, but don't get me wrong, I'm excited to record today because this MVP race is off the charts fun. It is the most entertaining I think I've seen in recent memory, and we're here to talk about some excellent athletes and some guys who have come up many times on this show before.
And we're not talking about the fantasy MVP. We're talking about the real MVP. I think from everyone that is playing, we all know it is Christian McCaffrey. He did make a pretty good case for himself to be an NFL MVP, but the team's not winning. And that is such a vital aspect to winning the NFL MVP race. Scotty, you've got Christian McCaffrey on a team. You would agree that is your fantasy MVP, am I right?
Oh, I could not agree more, and that's the thing about this. We'd love to do an episode where we debate the merits of fantasy MVP, but this year, what's the point? There is no argument. It is CMC, and as an owner, it has been just an amazing year because every week it feels like the question is just how many points is he going to get? Like, will he top 30? What about 40? Like, there's no debate. There's debate in the real world MVP discussion, but in the world of fantasy, it's CMC all the way, baby.
Now,
it's pretty crazy.
Now, if it's my understanding is correct, I think Scott also has his own definition of a CMC fantasy.
Hey, he is a good
him on a
man.
beach with no shirt on.
Have you seen his arms? You know what?
I have.
He could
Hey,
do a lot worse than CMC. It looks like he could hold you in those arms and just make you feel
This is
safe.
the pot calling the kettle black right now, Scott. I love the guy. I own him in one league, and it's been the greatest.
Oh, absolutely.
So, right now we've got some odds as of this recording on who is favored to be the MVP of the season. If you guys were betting men, if you were to put real money on the MVP, despite, doesn't matter who you're arguing for today, because Lamar Jackson has the best odds right now, and That's not necessarily always smart money, or maybe it is. I don't know. That's a good question. But who would you bet on personally as that who's actually going to win? I'll start with Scotty. Scotty, who do you think?
I've been thinking about this a lot, and night to night, I've kind of been flip-flopping, but I'm actually going to go with the gentleman that I am talking about today, and I will put my money on Russell Wilson. Now, I'm going to say this because new is always better in the NFL, and that's why Lamar Jackson right now is the odds-on favorite. And, I mean, there's a lot of people who think justifiably so. He's very impressive. The thing is, he jumped ahead of Russell Wilson while Wilson was on a bye. So Wilson didn't do anything wrong. He was sitting on his couch, probably with Sierra, which should get him just extra points anyway, in my opinion. And he was just watching as that epic performance happened. But once Wilson's back on the field this week, I could see down the stretch, there's a chance that Lamar will show the fact that he is still a young player, and maybe down the stretch he'll falter a bit, where I see Wilson just getting better and better as we get closer and closer to the end of the season, where those wins become so important in conference and division races. So I'm going to call Lamar pulling the foot off the gas pedal a little bit and showing his youth. And I think Wilson's going to just keep being an absolute machine and robot with those game-winning engineered drives. And I think in the end, people are going to vote for Russell Wilson.
Marky, what do you think? So Lamar's plus 160, Russell Wilson's plus 200. What do you think?
Okay. Well, if it's got to be between those two guys.
No, it could be. So Aaron Rodgers is plus 900, Deshaun Watson's plus 900, Dak Prescott's plus 1400, Patrick Mahomes is plus 1600, McCaffrey's 2000, like Tom Brady's 2800, Kirk Cousins 3300. You could pick any of these guys. So if you were a betting man here, or Michael Thomas, and Drew Brees is plus 10,000.
So if I was a betting man, I hear Scott, I hear your notion where newer is better, but I am sort of on the trolley where I feel like America, or just every fan in general, has a huge soft spot for Aaron Rodgers, and I feel like older is better. Everybody loves him. Obviously, our co-host Mac can't get enough of the guy, talks about Packers so much on this show. I'll admit, a little bit exhausting for me, but really, I do feel like he is I feel like he is coolly up there with Lamar and Russell. Maybe not in such a cinematic way, but there's a lot of arguments. There's a lot of arguments in his favor too, and I think just personally, and I feel like the general attitude towards him over the years makes him a lot of people's heartfelt number one choice for a lot of different reasons. But I mean, that's just me.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. Aaron Rodgers. If I was gonna bet on one guy, it would probably be him. Despite my some of my arguments against him, I do think he has a pretty good chance at winning.
So then the NFL MVP race is probably one of the most exciting things that the league has to offer around this time of year, other than the teams that are, playoff bound or fighting for a playoff spot. But the MVP debate and the race starts to heat up. And I think this year is one of the years where it's been tighter and more unexpected than others. And I think that's what makes it kind of interesting and fun. And there's just so much to debate. And I'll just preface this really early. We're not going to talk about a guy named Christian McCaffrey who has absolutely balled out this year. We're all going to concede the fantasy MVP award to him because he's been unbelievable for your fantasy teams. But we're not going to talk about him in this segment because the NFL candidacy for league MVP has to do a lot with team success. And unfortunately, the Panthers aren't exactly, taking really control of their division at this point, let alone in the playoff race. So that's why Christian McCaffrey's not in strong consideration, in our opinions. And we're going to talk about some guys that are leading their teams to winning records and potentially playoff spots. So we're going to kick it off here with Mark's take. Mark, I know you got a good one. You probably have our favorite, but I want you to go and run with it and give us your best case for Mr. Lamar Jackson.
All right. So before I get into this, is this just going to be like a full-blown dissertation with like every single point I have to make, or am I going to be stopping to let you guys interject? Because once I get going, I'm like a Mack
You know what?
truck.
Get going. I want
Yeah.
picture you're at like you're up on a podium in front of thousands of people and you're giving a monologue.
Okay, well in that case, now I would just like to introduce y'all to the man, the myth, the legend, the MVP front runner. And if anyone else got something different to say about that, come see me. To quote the great poet Mark Ingram.
He's right outside the arena.
So first off,
All right,
I'm going to
Mark
kick it off with
Ingram.
the stepping stone that we were all on before the season, and those were the power rankings leading up to week 1. So most analysts would have had the Ravens pegged at about 11th and 12th, and I saw about as low as 18th. So in the time since then, Lamar Jackson has been the pedestal. He has been the reason that they have skyrocketed to, many are saying first, many are saying second, but it's almost unanimous that they are first or second. So just power rankings alone, I believe that it is due to Lamar Jackson that the team was able to climb so high and become an almost unstoppable team, especially recently. And now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is his ability as a rusher. And the reason I do this first before passing is because he is seriously breaking records, and we're only leading into week 12 right now. So to look at his stat line, he is on 115 attempts. He has 788 rush yards and 6 touchdowns. If he were a running back in the NFL, he would be the RB13, and he is a quarterback. Granted, this is the team that has the most rushing attempts with 358, so they're the most rushing team in the NFL. Obviously, having Mark Ingram helps a lot, and I love how healthy he has stayed and how amazing he has been. Another thing is his elusiveness. Let's get serious here. The guy is untouchable. Anytime that there's a defender within a yard of him, he makes them miss, and he is the best at that in the league of any player. He has 7 consecutive 60-plus rush yards right now. 60 plus yards in one game, thus breaking Michael Vick's record. In his 2 seasons, he has 1,483 rush yards, thus breaking Cam Newton's record. So that's what I have to say about Lamar the rusher. But wait, he's a quarterback. Yes, I know, exactly. So carrying forth, I'll take a look at his passer stats, which every single person was down on him before the start of this season. There wasn't an analyst out there saying high praise about Lamar's throwing arm. So let's take a look at his numbers this year. So they are last in the league in pass attempts, yet he still has 2 games where he posted perfect passer ratings in the same season. Not a lot of people doing that these days, right? He is up from 58% completion to 66, which is an enormous boost for what everyone would consider a run-first quarterback. He has 19 touchdown passes this year. In total last year, he had 6. But not only this, he is making it work with no big names. He has a rookie as his wide receiver 1. He has Mark Andrews, who is a phenomenal possible Pro Bowl tight end, yet very, very young, and Nick Boyle and Hayden Hurst. Willie Snead, you're not going to hear about this guy. He's just making it work with whoever is on the field with him, and it helps that he does have some speed, but he is at the helm, and he is the reason why. So my last bid here, and this has to do a little more with our listeners, is his fantasy output. He is number 1 in all of fantasy. His rushing alone has him at RB13 in fantasy points. And let's not forget that he broke one of the most unstoppable forces in the 2019 fantasy season, and that is the New England defense. He put up 28.6 fantasy points against them and also gave them their first loss. So that, my friends and listeners, is why Lamar Jackson will win the MVP this year.
Well done, Marky. Well done.
Testify.
It is hard to battle against that. And the only narrative that I can think of is how he finishes the season. And that's what Scott touched on earlier as well, is stumbling over maybe some weaker opponents as we go forward, really showing that he's human and not this superhuman fantasy output guy we've seen so far. Do I see that coming? That's hard for me to. Maybe not. I'm a Lamar believer. We argued about Lamar versus Josh Allen earlier this offseason. I did land on the Lamar side. He's a lot of fun to watch, and that's going to be a big reason why he wins the MVP. Scotty, what do you think about Lamar, and do you think he's actually going to win?
Oh, it's going to be neck and neck this year. And obviously the gentleman that I've selected and I'm about to talk about, I do think has a very, very good chance. But really, for me, it comes down to these last few weeks of the regular season. Because right now, if I had to pick one, how do you say no to Lamar? Like, he just destroyed New England. Things that were supposed to be undoable, he has done. And done it with flash. He looks like Michael Vick. But it's a long season, and guys like Russell Wilson have made a career out of doing this consistently for years. So far, Lamar has done it for over half a season, really. And it's incredibly impressive. But I do think that time will tell, and if he really falls off in the last few weeks, I think it hands it over to Wilson. That's my thoughts.
They've got a tough schedule coming up, and this is going to be the make or break. They play the Rams, they play the 49ers, and they play the Bills. And if they get a couple losses in there, I think that's going to really affect his race. But Scotty, go ahead on your Russell Wilson take.
Now, when Mark was talking about Lamar Jackson, he referred to him as kind of like a fantasy robot. I'm going to make a case for an actual robot. That actual robot is the king of efficiency, Mr. Russell Wilson. Now, I feel all our viewers know Russell, and everyone knows he's one of the highest caliber quarterbacks in the league. But this man has never actually won the MVP award. And I believe that this season is finally his time. To begin my pitch for why he should be this year's MVP, I want to take it back to the start of the season, even on this very program, where we debated quarterback rankings. And it was generally unanimous that we all said this season was a season that Russell Wilson, from both a fantasy perspective and real-world football perspective, would decline as a quarterback. Wasn't necessarily that he would be a worse player, but the situation that he now inherited was just not the same. Doug Baldwin retiring. Let's take it back to the actual draft special we did. DK Metcalf, word came out that he was going to have knee surgery right around week 1. Like, it looked messy. Let's fast forward to where we are now. Seattle is 8-2. They are 8-2. With a defense that ranks 24th in yards allowed and 23rd in points allowed. So he went into the season with just one proven veteran wide receiver in Tyler Lockett, who at most is usually known as a very, very efficient utility player. I don't think anyone would call him your, lock WR1 before this year. And you had the needing surgery rookie of DK Metcalf. He lost Will Dissly early in the season, which was his real threat at tight end. And with each of these things, it became more and more focused on Russell making it work. So what did he do? Well, Russell has 5 game-winning drives this season alone and 4 fourth-quarter comebacks. Now, that's the most in the NFL, and in each case, it's 2 more than any other quarterback in the league, other than Buffalo's Josh Allen. So his stats, godly, really. He has over 2,700 yards with last week's bye week. He has 23 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. Those numbers are just so efficient. And when I come down to the main thing about why he should win the most valuable player, it's because I honestly believe with the way that Seattle's running game this year has taken a step back from the machine it was last year. Chris Carson, he's been great. Rashad Penny, non-existent. The whole three-headed monster idea that they had last year that worked so well, it really hasn't come to fruition this year, which has just consistently put more pressure on Wilson to find a way to win the game, and he has. And I truly believe for the rest of the regular season, that trend is going to continue. So when I talk about the actual award of most valuable player, I think the steady guiding hand of a robotic-like, efficient Russell Wilson is the reason that Seattle is in their current situation and will make a real run at the division title. I think he is the most valuable because without him, there is no way they would have orchestrated these come-from-behind victories or won these close games like when they bested San Francisco. So he is my pick for this year's MVP race, and it is because consistency week in and week out is the single most valuable thing in football. And Lamar Jackson is the shiniest, most exciting thing in the league by far. But consistency is what wins you championships.
Well put,
Yeah,
Scotty.
Yeah, you make a good point, and he is performing really well. And you're right, he was overtaken by Lamar on his bye week, which does bode well for your argument. And it was really about that San Francisco game and everything that happened. That was an absolute crazy finish to the game, and that really catapulted him up a lot of people's rankings. I mean, we knew he was good, we knew he was efficient, but that game in prime time was amazing. It was one of the best football games I've seen in a long time. So it's interesting, Scott, and it's surprising that he hasn't won an MVP title yet. And I think the big thing of going against him might be he's old news. We know who Russell Wilson is. We know he's efficient. And if their defense gets better, maybe that's a knock on him. They play a lot in prime time coming up. And if they stumble and lose, that is going to be in the public eye.
Well, and that's what I think makes this particular year's MVP race so exciting, because there is a lot of primetime games coming up down the stretch here. And because things are so neck and neck with everyone that we're mentioning in this episode, we're literally going to watch it play out week by week. It will probably come down to the last few games of who makes the big performance when it matters the most, probably in prime time. So it's a really exciting time to be having this debate.
Yep. I'm excited to hear Mackenzie talk about Aaron Rodgers, one guy that we've heard a lot about.
All right. I got my guy here, the guy that I think that has the third best chance to win the MVP trophy award. It's my man Aaron Rodgers. And yes, as you can probably notice, I am a Green Bay fan. And yes, this is coming from a place of homerism and bias, but I'm going to try my best to make a compelling case for him that doesn't use as much bias as you would think. So let's just look at the season so far. 2,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, which is pretty typical of Rodgers. He's been very efficient, very cautious with the ball. 102.7 passer rating. This is through 11 weeks. Okay, so some of the things that I want to bring up about Aaron Rodgers. Let's not forget that this man is a 2-time MVP. He won it in 2011. He also won it in 2014. In those seasons, Aaron Rodgers threw 43 and 48 touchdowns, which is phenomenal. Absolutely fantastic. His yardage of those 2 seasons averaged out to be about 4,400 yards. What has changed for Aaron Rodgers this year compared to those other MVP years? Rodgers right now is on pace for about 28 touchdowns, and that's a far cry from the 43 and 48 that he threw for in his MVP seasons. However, his yardage puts him right on pace for another 4,400 yards. So for me, Rodgers has been every bit as productive as he was in his other 2 MVP seasons. However, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams have been a huge factor for the Green Bay Packers in the red zone. And so when we saw the Packers using Jordy Nelson, Greg Jennings, Donald Driver, Randall Cobb, Jermichael Finley, Rodgers had all these weapons at his disposal to use, and they weren't a good running team. They had James Starks, they had Ryan Grant, they had John Kuhn. They used him at fullback. Those three guys in Rodgers' 2011 season, where he threw for 48, those guys combined for 10 total touchdowns throughout the whole season as a running back group. This year, Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones combined for 20 touchdowns, 15 of them on the ground, 5 through the air through 11 weeks. So for me, Rodgers' upside in terms of passing touchdowns and his impact on the game from that standpoint has been capped because the run game has been so good. However, Rodgers has been every bit as impactful and productive for his team and really making the use of a very depleted wide receiver core. I mean, this is a team that has knocked off very worthy opponents with a limited wide receiving core. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has brought in Alan Lazard, who's been a fourth string wide receiver. He's used Jake Kumaro, who was a basically preseason standout last year, missed the whole last season. I guess they were excited to use him, and he's finally getting some time. No Devontae Adams for 4 weeks. Green Bay also has beaten the most teams above 500, so winning teams. They've beaten 5 teams out of their 8 so far. Their 8 wins have come against teams with 500 and above records. With Rodgers' competition, he's 2 ahead of Russell Wilson and 5 ahead of Dak. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys have yet to beat a team that have won a game or have won more games than they've lost, which is crazy. Okay. Rodgers, and also beating those 5 winning teams, he's had the third hardest schedule based on a metric called defensive DVOA, which is basically the defense valued against the adjusted average or over the adjusted average, which basically takes into account third downs and meaningless plays. And so like third and longs and meaningless plays. So the teams that have had the easiest, New England, San Francisco, Dallas, Baltimore, Green Bay, has had the third hardest schedule in terms of defensive DVOA. So Rodgers has had a tough schedule and has done really, really well, winning 8 of those 10 games. I just think when you think in terms of what Rodgers has been able to accomplish so far, how much he was criticized in the offseason, him and LaFleur with a new coaching system, Rodgers not really looking like his old self. I think he's overcome a lot of adversity. I think this team shocks a lot of people where they are currently right now, leading the NFC North, when a lot of people wrote them off, said the Vikings were going to be able to come out and just wipe the floor with them. The Bears actually had equal chance of winning winning the Super Bowl preseason. They were 19-1 favorites. So were the Green Bay Packers. The Vikings were actually underneath them by Vegas odds. But now the Packers sit at 11-1 favorites. That's 5th best across the league. So the tune has changed from a betting standpoint. The tune has changed from a public perception. The Green Bay Packers are not to be messed with now, and it really all boils down to Aaron Rodgers and his ability to take over games and show shades of his old self. So for me, Rodgers has been every bit as good as his old 2011, 2014 MVP self. He's just been capped by touchdowns and that run game, how it's been so solid. The other thing I'll say about Rodgers is that he leads all qualified MVP candidate quarterbacks with the lowest drop rate at 2.3%. So I guess you could perceive this in different ways. For me, I think that he is making his receivers better by having them to do less work. Greg Jennings was recently on a podcast with Adam Lefkoe of the Bleacher Report, and he said that when he was a receiver for Aaron Rodgers, he felt like he didn't have to do all of the special things, like make the outlandish or the impressive catch. He didn't have to do that because Rodgers put the ball in such a tight spot where he just had to do his job of get to the spot, make a catch, secure the football. He didn't have to go and use, his ability to secure the football. So I think when you look at the guys that he's been throwing to, Geronimo Allison, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Jake Kumaro, Alan Lazard, Jimmy Graham, guys that really wouldn't strike you as star caliber players. I mean, Jimmy Graham has been, but he's way out of his prime. Davante Adams has only been with Rodgers for 6 of their 10 games. So 2.3% drop rate. I think Rodgers is putting the ball accurately in a lot of guys' hands. And if you look at him compared to Dak is 4% higher. He has the highest drop rate. And I don't know, if that's just his receiving core not being good at securing the ball. But I would argue that Dak's receiving core is a heck of a lot better than Rodgers has had, with Michael Gallup having a standout season, Amari Cooper being a stud wide receiver. We've all seen that. There's no doubt. Randall Cobb, former Green Bay Packer, quite good. Jason Witten, pretty good with the ball. Zeke, fantastic pass catcher. I think Rodgers, the 2.3% drop rate just proves that Rodgers is putting the ball on the money, and he's making life easier for all of those around him. So take Aaron Rodgers off this team, and I guarantee you they don't even make the playoffs. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. My thing here is that I don't think that Lamar Jackson or Russell Wilson can be beat at this point unless Aaron Rodgers is able to do a couple things to end the season. They're going to be so hard to beat. However, if Aaron Rodgers this week goes out and he beats the San Francisco 49ers on the road in primetime, Sunday Night Football, I think that is a huge chip for him in the MVP race. You go in, you knock off the best team in the NFC in prime time, and Rodgers has to have a heck of a game. He has to be the reason that they win this game. It can't be an Aaron Jones 3 or 4 touchdown day. It has to be an Aaron Rodgers 3 or 4 touchdown day. So I think that's check number one. The other one, you have to go in after you beat the San Francisco 49ers, and you have to go and beat the Minnesota Vikings in Week 16 on their turf to clinch the division. That needs to happen. If they can do that, their games in between are quite simple, quite easy. I could see this team finishing at 14-2. Best case scenario. They could run the table to end. Maybe they lose Week 17, whatever, 13-3. That's what Rodgers has to do, in my mind, to secure himself as a top candidate in the MVP race. It's quite simple. And if he can't do those things, I think he's out. But it does start this week going into beautiful Levi Stadium.
Yeah, Mac, you make a strong argument for your guy. It's a homer pick. We didn't want to make homer picks, but you're the most passionate about Mr. Rodgers. My biggest argument is that I think the Vikings actually win the division and win the NFC North, and that's going to stand the biggest part in the way of Aaron Rodgers. I also think the Vikings are going to beat Seattle in prime time as well, which is going to count against Scott's Russell Wilson, and that's going to be the big kind of downplay on your picks. And Aaron Jones has been phenomenal, and it really has vultured a lot of Aaron Rodgers touchdowns, like you mentioned. And his statistics as well are what's going to hold Aaron Rodgers back from the MVP candidate. Like I said earlier, and I agreed with Mark, is that if I was a betting man, I would probably pick Aaron Rodgers. He's but that's my arguments against him. Guys, do you have anything to say about Aaron Rodgers before I start my Dak Prescott pitch?
I will quickly say, as someone who is a Davante Adams owner in one of my keeper leagues, I do have a lot of respect for what Aaron has done this season, because I had to play the waiver wire week in and week out as they would update Davante Adams' health status from like Wednesday to, Saturday when they'd put him out. And the wide receivers, Lazard, and you name it, the guys I had to grab on like late Friday and slot in for Sunday, it was hard, and it was hard to watch. but he has put together such a great campaign using those guys. It's hard. It was ugly. So I will give him props on that. He has orchestrated a great record for the receiving threats he's had around him.
All right. So I'm going to start with my Dak Prescott. He's a little bit of a long shot, and there's a lot of really good points against him. My biggest narrative that I will start to say is his statistics. He's leading the league in passing yards, tied for second in touchdowns. He's got 3 passing touchdowns, and he has 3 more on the ground. A lot of your candidates have also lost to bad teams. Baltimore lost to Cleveland. Seattle lost to New Orleans without Drew Brees, and Packers have lost to Philadelphia and the LA Chargers. You can't discount Dak Prescott for beating up on bad teams. They've had 4 losses, and some of them weren't very good. The Packers beat them. But I think because they're the Dallas Cowboys, they are America's team. They have a ton of primetime games coming up. I think that will catapult Dak Prescott to the top of the list. Jason Garrett, their head coach, he is so bad. They are winning despite him. The Dak Prescott has put the Cowboys on his back. Zeke Elliott isn't the same running back he was. He has a rookie Tony Pollard who's been showing really good, even next to Zeke Elliott. And Amari Cooper, yeah, he's a good wide receiver. He's a little bit banged up. These next few weeks, 3-4 weeks, are gonna really determine the future of Dak Prescott. He's a guy that bet on himself. He wanted the $30 million. They weren't willing to pay. Now he's going to get more. He's going to get the $35 million. He might be the highest paid quarterback in the league. Well, I think he should be, as long as Patrick Mahomes doesn't sign before him. They're talking Pat Mahomes getting $200 million, over 100 guaranteed. It's going to be bananas. But Dak Prescott has now talked himself into that conversation. The biggest thing for Dak Prescott coming up is their matchup this weekend against New England. And I don't think any of those losses before, any of the easy wins, if they beat New England, nothing else matters. The Dallas Cowboys are a team that is now relying on Dak. Jerry Jones came out earlier or before the season and said if Zeke Elliott carries the ball 30 times, they win the game. Well, that's not the case right now. Dak Prescott needs to throw for over 400 yards. He's done it over 3 times, more than a lot of Aaron Rodgers, for example, and he's doing it on his own. I think he's got to play the Bears, he's got to play the Rams, he's got to play the Eagles, all coming up. If they win out, if their team's playing good, he's a lock for me. Their defense is terrible too. Their defense gave up 24 points to the Jets, 27 points to Detroit. Just because they're losing some bad games, Dak's doing everything he possibly can, playing out of his shoes, and I'm extremely impressed with Dak Prescott. Mackenzie's going to lose a bet to Taylor. I know Taylor's listening, about a top 10 finish for Dak Prescott, so sorry about that, Mackenzie, but he's really showing out. He's going to earn his money, and that's too bad for the Cowboys because they just paid Zeke Elliott $90 million.
Ooh, wow. You dug deep and threw some great numbers at us there. I do think you made a great point, and to me, this upcoming week would define almost the whole case for Dak Prescott. If he can't beat Brady and the Patriots, I don't think he stands a chance. Nor should he, because we've already seen Lamar Jackson beat Brady and the Patriots, right? Yep. So I do agree with everything you've said. Their defense, it is certainly not a formidable unit this year. He has been very important for the team. I will, bring up what is another thing that is essentially going against him. I would make the argument he actually has the most skill around him of any of the quarterbacks we've mentioned. I
don't know if that'll matter that much, but yeah, I mean,
it's just something that I feel comes into the equation when you're talking about most valuable player. When you have arguably the best running back in the league, and with Amari Cooper, are certainly a top 5, if not top 3 wide receiver at the position. I mean, you know, if you talk reliability, even at tight end, like Jason Witten, he's nothing spectacular at this age anymore, but he's a very reliable pass catcher at tight end. I'm just talking in reference to perhaps who, Russell Wilson had to deal with, even the wide receivers and tight ends.
I mean, I think
Lamar
Dak's
Jackson
making Witten look pretty good too.
When you look at Lamar Jackson's receiving options that he has put together this season with Willie Snead, guys that they're not cracking a top 25 roster on at least fantasy polls. So that would be my main
The volume
argument.
isn't there. The volume isn't there for that to happen, I don't think, because Lamar's not throwing as much as Dak.
Oh, for sure. I'm talking more about in general, even before this season. Just when you talk about the talent surrounding them, right? Amari Cooper is definitely a WR1. Zeke is potentially the running back one. Where, say, if you're talking about Baltimore, Seattle, you know, guys they have there.
Mark Andrews has been dynamic this season. He's been very good.
Oh, he absolutely has been. He's been a super rookie, and I mean, you could potentially attribute.
Mark Ingram. Sorry, Mark Ingram has been great this year.
He absolutely has been. He has been great. Yeah. But if you came down to the argument, would you say that Mark Ingram is better than Ezekiel Elliott from a skill?
The way
position?
they've been playing this year? I mean, it's closer than we thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. At the beginning of the season, I don't think anybody would have.
Oh, you're right. I would agree that no.
So it comes down, I guess, of how much the MVP has influenced the players around him and the team he is playing with. Where all of a sudden now, he's in that discussion. At the beginning of the season, we probably, I'm sure, put him pretty mid-range in our rankings, and now he's up there. So. You make a lot of great points, and like you said, I think it will all come down to if you can't beat Brady, I don't think he has a chance at all. Yeah, if he beats Brady, he's right there in it.
Yeah.
And that's true, and I think despite any numbers you can put at us, the biggest if for Dak Prescott is that New England game, and I don't like hypotheticals and conditional elements like that in the MVP race. I feel like between Lamar and Russell, there aren't as many ifs. There's not as many if this piece comes into play, then later on he'll be recognized for it. I just feel like the recognition right now is being funneled towards those two guys that me and Scott talked about, and maybe a little bit of Rodgers too. But right now, I think everyone's attention is on those two, purely because I think there's their level of play right now is very accessible. We've seen it in primetime games. Everybody loves them, but also, Landon, about Dak, they are America's team, and there's already automatically a lot of love for the Cowboys, and I don't know if that's really. I mean, I don't feel that way about them, but I'm not American, but that's honestly, that is the way people feel. They have a devout following, a huge following, and they all love Dak Prescott.
So I kind of already alluded to the fact that I think that Dak he's been amazing. I'm not going to downplay it at all. He's been fantastic. However, he's had the third easiest schedule for based on the defensive DVOA metrics. Plus, he hasn't beaten a team that has a winning record. Giants twice, Redskins, Dolphins, and then who did they beat? And the Detroit Lions. So those 6 wins, yes, they've been great and they've done it in convincing fashion. But then your division mate that you were trying to beat, the Philadelphia Eagles, you lose to them 37-10. You get absolutely torched. This is a team that right now sitting at 6-4 might not even win their division. Like, let's face it, the Philadelphia Eagles could come out and win this division. The other thing too is that I forgot to mention Aaron Rodgers is 10th right now in terms of pass protection from his offensive line. He's been sacked 22 times through 11 11 weeks. 6.2% of the plays have led to a sack for Rodgers. Guess who's number 1 in pass protection? Dak Prescott. So it only makes sense to me that as a pocket passing quarterback, to have a bigger pocket for a longer period of time, he should be more productive than Aaron Rodgers. Only been sacked 12 times. That's 4% of the plays. He's number 1 in pass protection behind that Dallas Cowboys offensive line, which is crazy to me because Zeke hasn't been that great, but in terms of pass protection, Dak has seen limited hits. So yes, he should be that productive. My little checklist, kind of like what I just did with Aaron Rodgers, my checklist here for Dak Prescott is that he has to do a couple of things. 1, you have to win the division. Like, if you don't win the division, it doesn't matter because team success is a huge, huge part of the MVP race. So if your team doesn't make the playoffs, it's over. The second part of the checklist kind of goes hand in hand with the first part. You need to start winning against some teams that have winning records. The New England Patriots coming up this week is a beautiful place to start. If Dak Prescott can beat the New England Patriots, only him and Lamar would have beaten them so far. So that's a huge feather in Dak's cap. If they can do that, if they can pull that off, I will certainly happily make a case for him. But you need to get into the playoffs, and you need to start beating some teams with a 500 or better record. The last thing, Dak Prescott, in their 6 wins, they've won by convincing fashion, by margins that are never in doubt. Dak Prescott is yet to have to make a fourth quarter comeback. He's yet to have a game-winning drive. So I need to see Dak Prescott step up and be the guy at some point this season, because I haven't seen that yet. I need the game to be on the line, under the lights, 2-minute drill, Dak Prescott ball in hand. I need to see him orchestrate that comeback and show that he can be the guy in the clutch situation, because that's what an MVP is. I need to see that. That's my little mini checklist for Dak Prescott. Get into the playoffs, beat some winning teams, be the guy in a 2-minute drill to clutch up and get your team a victory.
Yeah, I mean, if it ended today, Lamar Jackson would be the MVP, deservedly so. It'll be super fun to watch the end of the season. I'm excited to see if any of our narratives pan out. I mean, a dark horse would be a guy like Kirk Cousins or Jimmy Garoppolo.
Oh, that would be so sweet.
Because, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo is not getting recognized at all right now, and they're one of the top 2 teams in the league. Top 3 anyways, but it's because of the system, it's because of the running backs. He doesn't have to do a whole lot. Their defense is playing out of its mind. So I mean, I don't think he'll win. I think Kirk Cousins, like Mackenzie was saying last week, that the emotion around him was so bad. Statistically, he's been playing pretty awesome. And if the Vikings
I like that you
actually win the
him,
division,
because from a narrative perspective, actually, it's almost like from the first, say, 3-4 games of the season, you got to see what it was like if he wasn't integral to their offense. And then for the remainder of the season, the pressure was put on him, literally called out by wide receivers to throw the ball to them. And ever since that point, you've seen the change in the Vikings by him being a valuable player. So if that narrative keeps going through the whole season and he just keeps being that guy, there could be a case made for you saw what it was like without him, with him not making those throws and not being asked to make those throws. And then you saw what happened when he turned it on. Only time will tell if that can continue for the next 4 weeks.
Well, listen, guys, I think we all made some great points here. I'm really excited to see how this all shakes out and who actually is going to be the MVP of the National Football League in 2019. Right now, if I was a betting man, my money would have to be on Aaron Rodgers, as Landon kind of alluded to, just because I think he has the best chance of the guys remaining. However, he presents the best odds. There's a little bit of juice on him that I can get. I think it's Lamar Jackson's award to lose. If they somehow falter in the next couple weeks, I could see it going elsewhere. But listen, I want to thank you guys for being here, for listening to us, to watching us. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Leave us a comment who you think is going to be the NFL MVP. We would really appreciate knowing, because I know there are a lot of people out here that listen and watch us, and you're very intelligent and you have a lot to offer. So get in the comments down below and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. The other thing that we forgot to mention, and this is, I'll eat this one. This is definitely on me. But Mark, I believe, sir, it was about a year ago today that you joined this podcast, and it's been better and better ever since. So big shout out to you, sir, for being a part of the crew for 1 full year. We're coming up on actually our 2-year anniversary at the end of this season. So that's kind of cool as well. But Mark, welcome. It's been a great year. Let's hope that many great years follow, and let's keep kicking it. So for the 4 of us here, thanks so much for hanging with us. Hope you guys enjoyed the MVP talk. Let us know in the comments, and we will see you on Sunday as we go live every single week on YouTube via the Sleeper platform. Come hang out with us. Come get your starts and sits. It's week 12, and it's an important one. So we'll see you guys later. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at SMS_fantasy. Support this independent podcast at patreon.com/Saturday Morning.